So my friend Jose Palomino is and I say this a lot kind of jokingly, oh, he's a genius, and this one's a genius, and that one's a genius. Throw that out the window. This man is a genius. And to me, the genius has two components. One is super smart, and two is super generous. So you take the gen out of generous. I don't think there's an IUS in super smart, but that's why he's the genius and not me. So Jose is the CEO of Value Prop Interactive. And also when you introduce someone who's a real thought leader and real expert, you say, well, he wrote the book on whatever it is. Well, he wrote the book on Value Prop, and it's valueprop.com, and the book is actually out in the lobby, available for sale, available for signing. Not only one of the smartest marketers I know, but truly one of the finest men that I know. My friend Jose Palomino.
Thank you, David. I'm actually very proud to be part of David's Wolf Pack, right? And that's actually developed over the years, and even seeing it come together today has been very exciting. It's dynamic. I think we can all take from today in a real substantive way. I want to ask you this afternoon a very simple question. And so you're going to have to put your thinking caps on a little bit. And I want you to just write on any piece of paper, a couple of numbers. How many phone numbers do you have? How many phone numbers do you have? Right under that, right, how many email addresses do you have? Okay, letting people catch up with pen and paper. And then also, how many social platforms are you on? Now, this is the real hard part. Now, add them up. Okay, who has more than 5 as a total? How about more than 10? More than 15? 20? Okay, a few dropping off. Really? North of 20? Get a life. I'm just kidding. Just kidding. I'm guilty as charged. All right, so here's the deal. We're talking today about marketing in the age of the 15-second attention span. And there's 3 realities and 5 strategies I'm going to share with you right now. So the first reality is that customers, whether it's B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, customers are overwhelmed. They're overwhelmed. I call it, it's a form of induced ADD in a TMI world. Right? We just have too much going on. And your customers, whoever it is, whether it's a business product or service you're offering, or you're selling directly to a consumer, yourself, so much information is coming at you. It's just coming at you fast and furious. So here's what's changed in the well over 20 years of my career arc. When I started out in business, I had 2 phone numbers. Eventually, I was very proud that I actually had a beeper, right? Those of us, there's enough of you who know what that's about, right? You had a beeper. Did not have an email address. And in fact, if somebody sent me or left me a voicemail, and even that was, I was actually around when that was like an innovation, that you actually had voicemail. It wasn't a pink slip anymore. Whatever happened to the pink slip company, right? I wonder. Anyway, but so now in that innovation of voicemail and so on, people would reach out to you, let's say on a Friday afternoon. When did they expect you to get back to them? Monday. How about now? Instantly, 5 minutes, right? And it's a real expectation. It's like, well, I didn't. In fact, you'll get the follow-up text message or email saying, did you see the email I sent you 5 minutes ago? You haven't responded. And that's a real expectation. So just think about that. If you're developing messaging, you're developing a strategy, you're developing a communication plan, you're doing so in a world where people are just overwhelmed. And so what's happened is we're more connected than ever before, and yet more isolated. People can actually deflect you now, right? So you can't get a hold of somebody. You ever have somebody go radio silent on a contract they already agreed to, and you're waiting for the signature? Anybody know what that feels like? Of course. And of course, you have this struggle, right? You say, well, I don't know. How should we reach out to them? Should we send them a note? Should we send them flowers, maybe some cookies? Tell them, hey, by the way, did the contract go through legal yet? That's a very real reality. So the first reality is your customer, your prospect is overwhelmed. They're managing too much information. It's just coming at them faster and furious. Now, there may be somewhat of a generational shift where younger workers getting into the workplace are more used to this. Maybe, maybe not. I just think when you have 20 points of connection, it's a lot to manage. It's a lot to keep track of. So that's the first reality. We're overwhelmed with communication. Second reality that you have to embrace as a company, whether you're in a small company, a large company, it's almost self-evident if you're a single shingle, but not everyone here is single shingle. You have some folks working with you, is that everyone is a marketer now. Everyone is a marketer now. And what I mean by that is that your marketing isn't just your slogan, your brand, or even your corporate identity. It's the entire experience of how people experience your company. So everyone in that organization better be on board with being a marketer as well. I grew up, born and raised in New York City. I was mentioning to Gene before that he didn't bring up the 2009 World Series. So I brought it up for him. Well, well, the fair thing is it's equal misery right about now, right? So there you go. But what's interesting about that, growing up, born and raised in New York City, and one of the first real business book bestsellers was In Search of Excellence, right? Tom Peters, Robert Waterman. And so every organization said, we're going to be committed to excellence. So I remember having to go to the Department of Motor Vehicle down on Canal Street, on Chambers Street, and go into the DMV, which if you lived in New York, the DMV was basically, we believed we imported workers from the Soviet bureaucracy to work there. That was the plan. We were convinced of it. In fact, you would see these titans of Wall Street, right, all dressed, all in their three-piece suits and whatever, and they would be quivering before the person behind the glass because they knew they could send them to line 17, which nobody ever returned from line 17. Nobody knew. But at the DMV, right around the time, 1981, 82, right, because this book was making the waves, business thought, it was how organizations had to be transformed. It was a big banner, committed to excellence. I said, but they didn't tell the person behind the glass. It's a big banner. They didn't change the process. They didn't change their way of being. It was still horrible. It truly was horrible. Everyone is a marketer now for your organization because you're touching the customer so many different ways. And the expectation now is that this has to be genuine. Now, I'll tell you where it gets violated. Does anyone here, if I would take a poll and say, among all the industries that are exemplary for customer service, where should we rank airlines? Okay. Yet there's an exception to that. At least I believe it is. For me, in my experience, the last 5, 7 years, if Southwest is going where I'm going, I'm on it. All right? Just absolutely. I'm a raving fan. Absolutely love, love, love. Ambassador for Southwest because they treat me well. And I had to take a flight about 2 years ago on a different airline because the client was routing me and paying for it and so on. And I remember asking for my second bag of peanuts. So I wasn't violating my peanut privileges, right? I didn't think so. For an $800 ticket, I figured I was entitled to a second bag of peanuts. And I kid you not, the flight attendant, and airline remain nameless, but it was US Air. And they turned to me, and she turned, and she said, "Here," with contempt in her voice. And I said, wow, they must actually have like some sort of KPI or, peanuts withheld or something. Her bonus was tied to it. What's up with this? They weren't living out, and yet if you went to their slogans and all the messages, you see, the messages don't matter. What matters is if you're going to be a marketer, if you think of marketing as more than just messaging, but marketing is actually your business model, it's just strategy, it's how you deliver value to customers. If you believe that, then you better make sure that everyone, including the person who answers the phone, and if you outsource that, make sure that they're doing it the way you want it done. And think through how you are to do business with. Think about how when you promise somebody you're going to turn around a deliverable, does it get turned around when you promise it? All those things, those linkages. We're all marketers now. So we're overwhelmed. We're all marketers now. And here's the second thing, a quick flash poll here. And the answer is two answers. I'm going to ask first everything and nothing. And the question is, social media changes everything, if you believe that. Social media changes nothing. So everything, who would say? Okay. Nothing, some, okay, and some in the middle. That's kind of where I land on it, right? Social media changes a lot of things. Of course it does. It's a sea change in many ways in how communication happens between organizations, and we talked about communities and your customers and so on. So an example that came up, I was teaching a class on social media strategy at Villanova, and one of the examples that came up was a winery in California that had made a big noise about using Twitter to deliver better customer service. So somebody ordered a case of wine. It was a Friday. One of the bottles came out skunky. I guess, you know, it can happen, right? Just bad bottle. So they go on the Twitter support line and they indicate that. And here's the problem. The winery did not staff that Twitter line over the weekend. So it went unanswered. Well, it didn't go unanswered because here's what happened. What do you think the customer did, right? They said, oh, by the way, a little reminder, you know, I need some help here. By the time Monday came around, this thing was all over, everywhere. People knew how terrible the customer service was. And I guarantee you the owner of that winery would have flown the bottle in personally if they had known, if that was just to stop that bad reputation hit they took as a result of this. So social media does something very interesting in the world of marketing, really big dynamic that it changes. And it's simply this. Social media takes what used to be a one-on-one conversation and puts that out in public. So just think about that. It puts that out in public. Before, you had the 800 number, customer service. You could treat that person hopefully well if you were a mature and leading-edge kind of thinking company. But the reality is, now that exchange is in public view. Will Reynolds, who runs Sear Interactive here locally in Philadelphia, he gave a story, he shared a story about being on Delta. I'm really picking on the airlines today, sorry, but it is what it is. So anyway, and he was delayed on a flight, went on the Twitter support, and didn't really get satisfaction. He saw that somebody else, a very famous person, Oprah, had a similar, apparently, had a problem there, used the same tweet stream, and got immediate satisfaction, all right? How do you think that made Will feel, all right? So this is all out in the clear. So remember, the first thing, very important thing, is we're all overwhelmed. Second thing, we're all marketers now. Third thing, social media changes a lot of things. But what doesn't it change? Well, social media doesn't change the fundamentals that you have to offer something of value to the right target audience and deliver it well. Those things don't change. Those rules didn't get blown up. It's still business. It's still business, and business comes down to I have to connect what I can do for you or you or you in a way that you can understand. So social media is a communication vehicle, but it's not just another communication vehicle. It's another communication vehicle which operates in a different sphere and has some significant ramifications. So what are some 5 strategies, or what are the 5 strategies to handle this? The first one, to deal with this reality, is know thy customer well. Know thy customer well. It's amazing to me as I consult with owner-led businesses often, slightly smaller businesses. I do training for larger corporations and end up doing more consulting for mid-sized kind of companies, and how little they really know who their customer really is. If you ask them for a customer segmentation report on the last 2 years of business, like who actually bought from them, what were the titles of the people that bought from them, what kind of companies they were, they all have a fuzzy, or not even fuzzy. They'll say, we know who they are. And what they mean is they know the top category. They know the first one on the list. They know that intuitively. I mean, if they're awake, they should know that one. But it's when you get into the details of who's really there, who's really been buying from you. And then we say, well, when's the last time you took to lunch your top 10 clients? Well, we used to do that, but we got kind of busy. Right? Well, you're going to used to not be so busy, right? If you don't do that, you have to know your customer, know what really makes them tick, know what matters to them. The second one is similar to it, but because it's so available today, is know thy competition or else. If you don't know what your competition is up to, And by the way, today, in this very connected world, your competition, years ago, your competition would hold everything in their plans very close to the vest. What do they do with it now? Yeah, it's all right on their website. I mean, I'm not even talking about public companies where you can get into their public filings and so on Edgar. I'm talking about just plain out on their website. They're telling you what they're planning to do. They're telling you who they're trying to market to. If there actually are significant competition and they're running their show well, they're going to have a lot of that information out there. So you say, well, you know, we don't have a lot of time to do a whole lot of competitive analysis. And I say, well, you know, you could put a simple spreadsheet, put a couple of parameters out there, things you want to measure. Who do they say they're targeting? What success stories they may have, some recent clients, wins that they've had, some things that they say distinguish them. Put them up on maybe 4 or 5 things, put them up on a marketing board even, doesn't even have to be on a spreadsheet, a couple of Post-it notes, spend an hour or two doing this, and all of a sudden you'll have great clarity as to what your competition is up to. Is it definitive? Is it exhaustive? Of course not. You're not going to hire or necessarily, you know, buy Gartner Group reports unless you're really in high tech where that would be relevant. You could just spend an hour or two and have a much clearer view of what your competition is up to. Know thy customer, know thy competition, and then know that it's moving faster than ever before. You have to think, am I really adapting my organization for speed? Am I able to turn things around? I don't mean just on the production side, just on how quickly you can respond to things, how quickly you can put information out. If you think if you're working on that press release for that big win and you're working on it now for 60 days and you know you should get it out there, and then somebody in your office says, you know, it's getting kind of dated, right? No one's been there, right? No one's ever been there, all right? You know, things like that, I mean, you have to start thinking about how else can we adapt for speed. Some of the suggestions made earlier about Odesk and Elan, sometimes that's just a bottleneck. I just don't have the person. Well, guess what? You need a logo design. There's sites that will put up a competition and you'll have 10 great graphic artists compete for that logo. And I'm not saying if you're Coca-Cola, that's what you should do and keep your executive job. But for a lot of us, that's perfectly fine and you'll get some good ideas. And I mean, there are things you can do to adapt for speed. And the fourth thing related to that would be know thy numbers. And that's really get into the analysis of your business. Like, what is it really doing? What do the numbers look like? Do you track things like, and some simple ratios. I mean, simple like, you know, average sale. I mean, I'm assuming basic accounting. You're tracking basic revenue. But do some analysis with that because you can. On the web, do you have Google Analytics on your website? Do you know how much traffic you're getting? Do you know how many what your newsletter subscriber base has grown to? Those are simple things to get at, and they give you some indication, are you making some progress in these things? I'm not saying that there's this tremendous benefit necessarily to say, I got this many likes and we got 10 more likes on our Facebook page. I'm talking about a series of metrics that give you a vision or visibility to what is my business really doing. Until you have that, you're completely, it's like you're flying a plane, strictly seat of the pants. There's no dials. The good news is the dials are available to even the smallest company. That wasn't true 20 years ago. 20 years ago, the big thing was executive dashboards, the software, very advanced software. Millions of dollars would be spent to get to the information that today is available to each and every one of us in this room. The last strategy to deal with this ADD in a TMI world where customers are overwhelmed, we're all marketers now, and social media means everything, means nothing. In that world, we know our customers, we know our competition, we know it's moving faster than ever before, we know our numbers, we have a handle on that. The most important strategy to handle this whole fast-changing world is know your value. Know your value. Know what you do that's distinct. It's kind of a gun to the head kind of question. What do you do that is different? And I don't mean different for the sake of difference. I mean different in some substantive way, different in a way that matters to your customers. Well, here's a good way to find that out. Ring, ring, Mr. Customer. Why are you dealing with me? Why do you buy from me? Have a dialogue with your customers. Find out why they picked you. Well, we were doing a random check through the Yellow Pages and, or a Google search, and your name came up and you were lucky that day. I don't think most of us get business that way, right? We were referred maybe, so that's fine, that's great, but how else? And if you do repeat business, why do you keep dealing with me? And I don't mean in any way that you approach it from a sense of defensiveness like, hey, I don't know why you'd want to deal with me. I don't mean you come at it that way. Like, I was just wondering because I couldn't figure it out. But rather say, I want to get sharper in communicating the value I bring to the marketplace. So I want to understand that better. And since I value our relationship so much, and it seems like you feel likewise, can I ask you a few questions about why it works for you? Can we all do that? That'd be pretty straightforward and easy to do. Know your value. In my book, Value Prop, and in my practice, I focus on 3 dimensions of distinguishing yourselves in the marketplace. And we call that I3, very simple because it's not a consulting book unless it has something clever like that, but here it goes. The first one is what you're offering or some new service or something. Does it have something new to it? And we call that innovation, right? The first I. Is this something net new? Are you bringing something fresh? And we can all add something fresh in the service dimension if we work at it, if we think about it, if we ask our customers and prospects what it is that could set us apart, something that they haven't seen before. Say, well, I would like, in your category, I would love it if somebody would offer me a performance-based budget as opposed to straight fees. And you say, well, nobody does that in my business. Oh, wow, light bulb. Maybe if I did it, it would be a differentiator. Maybe, maybe not. But that's something that's worth looking at. Second, is what you're offering indispensable? Is it useful over the long haul? Is this a temporary fix? Or are you designing your programs, your offerings, your services, your platforms so that it delivers value over time? And thirdly, and this is more of a design issue, and it's relative to your industry. So if you're designing a sports car, this third dimension would mean something different than if you're designing wrenches for plumbers. But are you bringing something inspirational, something a little sexy? Are you putting some attention to how you do what you do, to make it interesting, to make it exciting? Know your value. So in this ADD in a TMI world, knowing your customer, knowing your competition, knowing it's moving faster, knowing your numbers, and knowing your value are all pivot points, all things every one of us in this room can do, take seriously, and make a difference. So with the very 30 seconds we have here, I just want to close with this thought. And I want you to think about this. Based on everything you've heard, and even throughout the day, but just thinking about this segment, we heard about a number of different ways that people like to receive communication, ways people are actually making communication happen. Thinking about your value, because that's really what matters at the end of the day, is what are you doing that really matters, and who does it matter to, and why should they care? What are you going to change? What are you going to change? What are you going to do differently? I just want to leave you with that thought. Thank you very much. Let's enjoy the rest of the conference.